So, welcome to episode 2 of Heidi's Lane. What you're about to listen to might seem out of order if you listened to episode 1 last week. If you recall from episode 1, I explained to you that I had started production of this podcast months ago. And for reasons that I talked about last episode, it didn't go out. However, the 4 or 5 episodes that I recorded were actually very real and raw and vulnerable. And they're going to give you a peek into how this podcast came about, how it started, how it was named. There's a lot that we talk about in this upcoming episode. Actually, you're about to listen to it. So yeah, enjoy this. Enjoy this real, raw, vulnerable look at how it all began. Enjoy. I don't know what I'm doing. And I think it's super important that through this podcast journey, you guys get to see all the mess ups, all the parts that are typically edited out, all the things that maybe on social media I would edit out so that, there's time constrictions on social media, right? There's like, I have a minute to do a story. And so you're forced to edit out so that it can all fit. But I also think it's super important that you guys have a behind the wall view of who I really am, what I'm really about. And I say that because I want you to know that it's not always beautiful. In fact, it's not. It's really, really messy and it's super chaotic. And I have so many imperfections. I'm sure a lot of them are apparent. And I love to show that. Because if I, in my messiness and in my chaos, can still create and find happiness and joy and appreciate and love the life that I live and accomplish things that maybe you think you can't, right? If I can do it with this messiness and have you see it, my hope is that it will give you hope that you can too. What I was saying is, I don't know what I'm doing, but I do know why I'm doing this. A podcast is a thing that I wanted to do for years. And I'm going to get into this in a little bit. I feel like at this point in my life, the why has shifted quite a bit. And it's more for healing myself than it is for anything else, healing me first. And consequently healing any of the listeners that might relate to any specific parts of my journey. I actually have a guest that I'm going to be bringing on because there are so many nerves in this that I think it's okay to have a security blankie. Like literally I have one in front of me and I brought my good friend, Keira, come on in, because I want this to feel like a conversation. I want every podcast episode that I do. Hi, here she is. Oh. I want every podcast episode that I do to feel like a conversation that I'm having with you, but I want everyone listening to feel like I'm also having a conversation with them. I may look at you, I may not, but I think it's important. And here's the thing. Hi, Keira.
Hi.
Thanks for doing this.
Let me get cozy.
Yeah, let's get cozy.
Let's get cozy here.
So the reason why I wanted you to do this with me is for it's a handful of things. But first and foremost, this girl I've known her for how many years now? We were 19.
I was 19.
How old are we?
I'm 40 now. So
I'm 41.
Like 21 years.
Over 20 years.
Yeah.
We've known each other. So our ex-husbands, my first ex-husband and her ex-husband were actually friends in high school, right? Mm-hmm. And so Keira and I knew each other and were friends with each other. Lifetimes ago.
I know. I lived in my first condo was yours. I bought it from you.
Oh, that's right. I saw at like 19. I was always a hustler. I forget about this.
You were. I bought our first condo was yours.
That's right. It was the first one that I bought from my grandpa, who gave me a killer deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I sold it to you.
Yeah. So, I mean, our paths have danced back and forth for a long time.
Isn't it? It's crazy to think of. I mean, that's a whole separate podcast episode, who we were back in 2001 or whatever year that was.
Yeah.
Like, we were completely different people.
Yeah.
And what's so cool about Keira is that every every fork in my road, like between my first marriage and my second, and then between my second and Dave, and then again after Dave, at every single incremental fork in my road, Keira magically showed up. I mean this, Keira, and I've said this to you, and I'll say it again. You have been a lighthouse for me. And it's almost like if I were to picture, on the train tracks, how when there is like a fork in I wish I had the word. I should have researched this ahead of time. But how there's that thing that like the director, like
pike?
Is that what it is?
Word pike
it's the thing where there's a fork, and one of the things like directs you one way. You are that thing for me.
Wow.
And I'm forever grateful, because every fork in the road or every huge shift in my life has come with options that could have either made me or broken me, right? Made me a better person and brought me toward my highest self, or torn me down.
Yeah.
And you have been such a beautiful, open, accepting, non-judgmental, safe place for me. And I mean, and like, without going into too much detail, you were the person who led me to the place where after my first divorce, I remember I was just a mess. And you're like, I really think you need to go to this thing called Landmark. I actually started seeing your dad as a therapist. Therapy's been a huge part of my life. And at that seminar, self-development seminar, is actually where I met Chris.
Yeah.
And then, after Chris and I divorced, you came into my life again and introduced me to breath work, healing, meditation, by taking me to people who shifted my life in a way that I wouldn't have been able to otherwise. And then here we are now.
I know. I have goosebumps from my head to my toes right now.
And here's what's crazy. You came back into my life. Like, we can go years without talking. And then when we do, it's like we never left, we had never left each other.
Yeah.
And there's always love. There's never, this is a sign of a good friend. There's never bad blood for not having responded or reached out. It's just like, there's nothing. You are love. You came back into my life was that December? You've always been in my life, but like really deeply.
It was,
or was it November?
My marriage ended September 2022.
So it must have been October.
And it was October, and you just reached out and you were like, you can come use my beach house.
Yeah.
And I've been married for 20 years. I had never taken a trip just on my own to just be alone. And I was like, I have to do it. And I feel like it was at the beach house where it was like, we just
bonded again. And I was in a big transition, because that was the point in my life where another relationship was ending permanently. And you really helped me through. And I think that was the time where I was kind of getting my bearings in another way that truly prepared me for, I think, the ultimate heartbreak that I felt so far. And now in this phase where, back to the podcast, I actually haven't told you this yet, but this is huge for me. Like, it's such a big deal for me and this hit me this morning. It's a huge deal for me to be venturing on my own for the first time without a man backing me or believing in me or giving me their approval. Like this right here, it's me, it's you, it's Abby, it's God, right?
Yeah.
And I posted a little bit on it on social media today, but I didn't really give all of the details. But truly, every single thing I have done, and I'm realizing this because I've been working through a lot of my childhood trauma that stems from my relationship with my dad. We all have it. But everything I've done, from how I achieved as a child and a teenager for my dad's approval, right? And I never got it in the way that I wanted it. He gave it to me, but not in the way that my child brain thought I needed to hear it. To what I'm learning now is I don't need a man's approval. I don't need a man to tell me I'm doing it right, to tell me I'm doing it well. I don't need his stamp on it. And what's interesting is yesterday, in this is how this epiphany came to me. I was spinning, overthinking how to start a podcast. I mean, we'll get to this in a minute. The amount of resistance that has been and the amount of times I backed out. To get to here is an achievement alone because I have backed out so many times over many years. But as I was driving, I was like, man, I'm nervous again. Like, I don't think this is a good idea. All this self-talk is going through my head. And I reached out to two of my friends who are men because I was like, they'll know what to do. Like something in my brain, again, childhood trauma, it's generational patterns. They'll know what to do. They'll know the answer to this. All while, like, essentially what I was doing is I was downplaying or not recognizing and acknowledging my knowing. Yeah. Right. And good news is I couldn't connect with either of them because when they had called back, I was busy. And then this morning, we didn't match up. And it hit me this morning. I'm like, God is making this not align because I don't need a man to tell me I can do something. I don't need him to save me. No one's going to ride in on a horse. Like no, like knight in shining armor is going to take me away and live happily ever after. No, like this is my life. Mm-hmm. I am mine to save, right? I am my own knightus, if that's a word, in shining armor.
And what does that feel like in your body?
This is a very good question. Okay, before the realization, it was scary. My whole life, even when you and I reconnected in October, you probably remember the fear, right? The fear of jumping from a relationship, not jumping, but actually allowing a relationship to end that Dave and I knew was not right for a year at that point. But there's fear in not having a man know the answers and not having a man to lead me or guide me. Same with business. It's like there's a fear in jumping or tearing down my businesses, which is another whole podcast episode, destroying everything and not having a man as my partner. There's fear. There was fear in doing this. My very first, I don't even want to call this a business venture because this isn't to make money. This is a heart venture. But doing this without a man was scary. But the realization, when it popped in my head, I think I said, oh my gosh, I can't wait to tell you something. Yeah. It feels powerful. Yeah. And I had a conversation with a friend last night who we hardly ever talk. We've only talked twice since high school, and she called me and I picked up. And I would never pick up because it was nighttime. I was tired. And we had a great conversation. And one of the things she said, I want you to know that, it's funny because another friend had said the same. She said, I want you to know that like the moon, you are always whole, which is a saying I recently heard and I have written on a Post-it in my room. And then she said, and your perfect match, not perfect match, but your match in a man would be like the sun, who is also whole, right? But she said the moon doesn't need the sun to do its job at night. So I don't need the sun. Yeah. I don't need a sun. I am a perfectly whole moon. And I feel whole. Yeah. right now in this moment. Like, let's clarify. When people are like, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Well, right now, here's how I am. But that can shift and fear can creep in. But at least that knowing of my power is there.
Yeah.
And I can always tap into that. So whole as we are, venturing into something that we don't know. And I say we, she knows what she's doing. So Keira's had a podcast for, hold on, let's talk about that real fast. Keira's had a podcast for how many years?
4. It has had 3 different names because that's how I roll. It's fine.
It's the evolution.
It is.
And listen, it is okay. I want people to know it is okay for things to evolve. It's okay for things to change. I think part of my overthinking that had me not wanting to start this or scared to start this is like well, what if I do it wrong? Right? Like that's a big thought that comes into all of our minds. What if I do it wrong? And what did you say to me when I said, what if I do it wrong?
I said, the only way you do this wrong is if you don't do it like Heidi. You have to do it Heidi's way and any other way. So anything that people have told you, this is how you need to do a podcast. This is how you need to do your message. This is what needs to be on first episode. No.
Yeah.
If you do it Heidi's way, that's the right way.
I love that. And this is actually one of the reasons why I'm keeping all of this stuff in to episode number 1. Number 1, because it's my way.
Yeah.
And number 2, I want you to see so that you can work through, because I have full confidence that like every single thing I do, I don't know what I'm doing at first. I have no idea what I'm doing at first. And I think what separates me from people who might not feel like they've achieved is I do it anyway. And I think that goes for any single person who is your version or your definition of successful. And I'm not talking about financially successful. I'm talking about, for me, success is achievement and fulfilling my heart. And sometimes it comes with financial success and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it comes with success in the way of learning lessons. But every single person, I think, would say the same thing. They were scared shitless too.
Yeah.
And they did it anyway. And they're,
yeah.
And I love that you said the only way to do it wrong is if you don't do it your way.
Yeah.
And my way is to not edit.
Yeah.
And I might change my mind. I'm always going to reserve the right to change my mind next week if I want to. But I think since Dave passed and I came back on social, if anyone saw my stories, I'm acting like everyone watches my stories. You probably don't, or you might. But I had actually shot some stories showing a studio. Mm-hmm. And I was so excited. Right? Like I always do. I get really excited.
That you flew to and yes. I drove 4 of my kids to.
She drove her kids to come help me.
It was great. It was actually a really great trip. It was fantastic.
Let's just talk about the sacrifice that went into that. Like truly, Keira had just gotten home from New York talking on a big stage. And she had previously led an event. I don't remember what order in Arizona, out of state. She lives in Idaho. She gets back from this whirlwind week and a half. And I say, Keira, I'm ready to do my podcast. God bless you and me for my special ridiculousness.
It was so good.
I said, I'm ready to do a podcast. Can I get your help? And this is something I actually do need to work on in my life. And I mentioned this to you, is enrolling people in things that I'm excited about because I feel it so much in the moment, whether it's love or business or like I am a hopeless romantic with everything, including work.
Yeah.
And I said, can I get your help? And you, without hesitation, I had barely finished my sentence. Yeah. And you're like, I'll pack up my kids and drive 6 hours right after I get home and get my kids back. And you did. And you drove 6 hours for me.
I'll tell you why. Because there's not a lot of people in this world that I'm super close to because I don't know, I'm introverted and I have 5 kids and I run business. There's not a lot of people. You're one of my people.
Thank you.
And because you're one of my people, when you're like, I need help, I'm like, holy hell, yes.
Thank you.
I'll show up for you. And it was an amazing trip.
Well, but let's talk about,
and also maybe not, but it was both.
So let's really talk about the trip. So Keira gets there.
I get there at 2 a.m.
Yeah, 2 a.m. Drives all night.
Thursday morning. No, Friday morning.
Yeah.
Friday morning.
So Friday during the day, we're in studio Abby and Susan are setting up my set. We're so excited. We're doing this podcast. We pick the music. We know what the cover is going to look like. We're talking about the title and we're shooting the next day.
Yeah.
And
we were jazzed.
We were crying.
So
we were like all
excited.
crying.
Yeah.
And I get to the hotel and I have a freak out where I have not just a freak out, but a realization that in a time where I am coming home to me, and by home, I mean in my body, in my soul, in my heart, in my head, like I am coming home.
Yeah.
And I'm coming home to me. I'm coming home to my kids. I'm shedding a lot of my identities that previously told me I was enough, even with regard to my businesses, right? And that's a super scary thing. So I'm in this space where I've committed to myself to coming home, even if it means financial stress, even whatever it could mean a lot of things, even if it means the world, I don't get the validation of being a coach or a teacher anymore. So that I can heal.
Yeah.
And this realization had me like, why am I doing this in a studio in Utah?
Which rewind 2 days before, I was like, Heidi, why are you doing this in Utah?
And I was like, because this is the way that it is. It's going to be perfect. And so I got her jazzed on the idea of doing this out of state. And I don't think it's a bad thing in the long run. But my realization was, in a world where I am committed to me and my kids first and foremost, like those are my big rocks in the jar, right? A podcast has got to be the sand. Like everything besides me, my relationship with God and my relationship with my kids and my relationships with others after that, like friends who matter, those are my rocks. Mm-hmm. There is literally not another rock in my jar. Mm-mm. The sand is a podcast and anything else, right? The sand is the biggest, grainiest podcast because it's the one I'm the most excited for. However, and it's a part of my healing. But I thought, why would I start a podcast in a studio in Utah? It needs to be in my home.
Yeah.
I need to know that no matter what, without a shadow of a doubt, I can hit record and I can talk, not dependent on having to fly to a studio or have somebody be here. And you know what? It's also more real.
Yeah. And cozy.
It's
and
raw.
Like so cozy right now.
Yeah.
The studio is so beautiful and I love
I
the
can
studio.
do some in the future. Like if there are people I'm like, if I don't want to, there's sometimes I don't want the energy of someone else in my home.
Yeah.
And so I love the studio, but I felt like to set the scene, set the tone in my home first. So I can wake up with no makeup on and record and just be me. And then if I want to go to the office for a day and I'm in Utah, there are people that I know that we can film in the studio in Utah.
Yep. Yeah.
And I think that's a big lesson for anybody, right? I think we all, and I'm not going to say we all, I, and a lot of the women who I've worked with, we often get we wonder why we try and fail and try and fail and try and fail over and over, right? Yeah. Like, why can't my business succeed? Why can't relationships succeed? Why can't anything succeed?
Yeah.
The biggest thing I always talk about the idea of integrity, right? Yeah. It's doing what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it, not just everybody else, but mostly to yourself. And what happens in transformation, we always say that the biggest issue people have and why they try and fail so often is they overcommit.
Yeah.
You don't really think before you jump. Now there is a happy medium because we don't want to overthink and never jump, but we also don't want to always just jump. Like there's a time and a place to just jump.
Yep.
But thinking through those things, and if I want this podcast to be something that's sustainable and doable, I got to think before I jump.
Well, and when you told me that, it was just like so much truth in my body.
Yeah.
Like, it's not sustainable to fly to Utah all the time to record episodes when you have 4 kids. Like, it's just not. This isn't sustainable. And the thing that came to me was like, this is so damn important. Like what you are doing here is so important. We have to create like the hold, the thing that's going to hold it. Because if it's not sustainable, you're going to burn out. And then nobody's going to get this magic.
Oh,
So like,
thank you.
that's why when you said I'm doing it in my home, I'm like, yeah. So I will
Holy
fly
hell
on
yes.
down.
Yeah,
I will fly on down.
Here she is again. Really, she's just thanking me for being one of her first guests in her closet.
I thought you were going to share something else. Not yet, Heidi. We're going
No.
to keep that one.
I'm not going to share that.
So let's go back to the closet. So my podcast started in a closet in my house. And I had Heidi. You were probably one of my first 10 guests. So like, thank you.
She said, I love how she's like, hey, I started a podcast. It's the studio. She called it a studio. As at my house. I'm like, that's amazing. Keira has a studio at her house.
That was cool.
And then Abby, we get to her house and she's like, come up into this room. The room is great. She walks me into a closet, like literally just a small closet, shuts the door, sits down and goes, okay, this is where we're doing it. And I'm like, this is your studio? You're like, yeah, the acoustics are great here.
Horrible. The acoustics were horrible. But it was like, it was my little safe place.
It was.
Right? Like
I felt cozy in there.
It was so cozy.
We pulled cards. Do you remember that?
We did pull cards. It had all my crystals everywhere. And
no.
It was a magical closet.
Guys, I like over the years, I'm becoming kooky.
It was so great. But do you know what sucked about that episode is that we laughed so much and moved around so much that the audio was out of control because we were like this the whole time.
So when I've gone back to look at any podcast that I've done with other people, it is literally like I'm laughing over them the whole time.
Okay, wait, we have to go back to the closet.
Okay.
So while we're there, Heidi tells me, I'm going to start a podcast.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to start a podcast. And I was like, yes. And so it was like so beautiful that you spoke that in my little closet. And here we are.
4 years later.
It's okay. It's okay.
Here we are.
But like who you are now and who I am now, we're like lifetimes different.
We are.
Literally.
So I feel like that's a good segue to this whole idea of me doing a podcast because it is something I think you were the first person to have me realize if she can do it,
if she can do it in her closet, I got this.
But I'm serious, Keira. I was like, well, if Keira can do it, I can do it.
It's so great.
Like at the time, we had a TV show and stuff. So I'm like, I can figure this out.
Keira's rigging this in her closet. I got this. And it's true.
But in all honesty, I think that's really important for people to know. I think sometimes people look at me or anyone who has a platform.
Yeah.
And has what the world would call success. And they think, oh, they know how to do everything. They can do anything. Not so much. Like especially when our brand, my brand was the result, let's be honest, it was an accidental result of a TV show that my ex-husband had. And I just really am a workhorse and I loved my husband and I loved the people that I worked to the point where they wanted to bring what was happening on the show. So a brand was created for me. I have so many people saying, how did you create your brand? I'm telling you, God wanted me to have a platform. Yeah. And I think because of it, I've dealt with a lot of unworthiness.
Yeah. But can I say something?
Yeah.
If you weren't this magical, powerful being.
I'm going to be touching your leg.
Yeah, I know. I think that's just what we're going to have to be.
We're going to touch each other's
I'm
legs.
saying something really important right here. So
focus.
Hold up. Okay. But if you weren't who you are, which is like you are just, like just your presence shifts people. If you weren't that, none of this would have been built. So maybe just like Steve Jobs happened to live down the street from the one computer place in the world and happened to, like his life environment teed him up to become the Steve Jobs. Yeah. So your life environment teed you up, but because of who you are, that's why it worked.
I love what you just said. And I mean, there are so many directions we could go right here. But there's a really great Steve Jobs quote that I'm going to jack it up, but it's something to the effect of, we can never connect the dots looking forward, but we can always connect them looking back.
Yep.
And it was the whole idea of skill stacking, right? There were so many things in my life. When I say skill stacking, like the traditional person, it's like, oh, I worked at a pizza joint and then I delivered newspapers and then I nannied and then I did all these things. And now I'm this massive CEO, right? So that's kind of the idea of skill stacking.
Yeah.
However, for me, it was shame stacking.
Oh, I've never heard that before. That.
And like even saying it like hits me in the heart a little bit. From just all my mistakes and my mistakes made my eating disorder to I was engaged after high school and I ran away from it. I was married and divorced. And there's just thing after thing after thing after thing in my life that I had shame for and shame around. And as a result, I'm a super brainy, logical person. But my life experiences have created empathy and heart and compassion and non-judgment in a way that I wouldn't have otherwise. And my dad was the greatest dad and he struggled with addiction and with my eating disorder. I mean, it's just all of these things that happened when I was placed when Chris and I created the show together. Yeah. But he was the star, right? And I was just the fixer in the background who was trying to fix everybody and everything, including, business for Chris. And I was his manager to these wonderful people who had food addictions, which was they and I were no different. Like I had a food addiction, but I could just hide it because I was bulimic back in the day. And so there was a bonding that happened, right? So it was shame stacking. And then there was a moment where I thought I would never, I thought I'm always going to regret. I would have that run through my brain. I'm always going to regret this. I'm always going to regret this mistake or this mistake. And then there was a moment where what I previously considered a mistake, which was my decade-long eating disorder that ruined my esophagus and my teeth. I'm literally getting an endoscopy on Friday to check the damage from years and years of this in the past. It ruined my teeth. I had to get veneers. I mean, it ruined a lot. But in that moment, I saw that all of the pain and all of the struggle and all of the mistakes and all of the shame was for a reason. Yeah. So that I could connect and help them and understand them in a way that I never could have otherwise. Yep. And so kind of fast forwarding over some stuff because there's a lot after that, right? It doesn't stop. I always say I'm the jack of all trades and the master of none. And when I say the jack of all trades, it's just I've messed up a lot in life. Yeah. And so how does that qualify me? I mean, it qualifies me because I feel like it doesn't need to qualify me to anybody, but it qualifies me with God. Yeah. And it qualifies me with myself. I've lived a lot of life. And I feel like if I can share my experiences, my thoughts, my feelings in a way to where anybody listening can relate or see a part of who they are in my story. Yeah. Hopefully they can be helped.
Well, and they will. Yeah. And this is something I say to authors as I help them write their books is your life qualified you to write this book. Your life qualified you for everything that you've done. And I want to highlight that on the energetic scale of emotions, shame is the lowest one closest to death. Ooh. And I want to just really help you see how powerful you are. Because if shame has been the thing that you've had your feet in, for you to have created what you've created, even with the shackles of shame, holy hell, Heidi. Who are you? Right?
There's not as much shame anymore.
But
I've broken free from it. But yes.
Right? Yes. To lead up. And I think this is so good for the listeners because everybody deals with shame. Yeah. And that's why people relate to you is because you're honest about it. And it's if you've been able to create what you've created with shame pulling at you, anybody can create. And that's what you bring.
I love that. Shame and unworthiness, which let's be clear.
Yeah.
That unworthiness probably, it still exists in a way. There's a lot less shame.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I've transformed the way that I think.
Yeah.
I don't believe in right or wrong, mistakes, or I don't believe in that anymore. I believe there is what I do, and I either win or I learn, right? I love it.
Say that again.
I believe that I do what I do,
Yeah.
and I either win or I learn.
Can we make that into a poster?
Yeah, but I have to give credit to Drew Manning, my friend, who taught me that.
That's so good.
I can't take credit. It is so good. And it's kind of like in nutrition. I always tell people, so here's what's interesting. I am highly qualified in the things that I teach, right? Like in nutrition, in fitness, and I'm qualified there.
Yeah.
But that's not where I feel like I'm meant to be.
Yeah.
And I'm in a season where I'm not teaching. And I could, because I'm qualified to teach, but I'm in a season of healing for me.
Yeah.
And I actually was explaining to Jack Canfield, Chicken Soup for the Soul guy. Listen, he is America's grandpa. I love him. He is love.
Yeah.
And he and I have a relationship, like we've met through business, and he's just a good friend of mine. And he wanted me on his podcast a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
And I believe he had asked me right before Dave passed away, before my world crumbled. I accepted. And I don't want to say crumbled. Before I realized how strong I was to build on my own. And I accepted. And then as it drew closer, I sent him this big email. And I said, Jack, I don't know that I'm in a place to teach. So if you want, like, let me explain where I'm at emotionally. I've torn down my businesses because I feel like I've been called by God to be a mom.
Yeah.
I feel like this is my calling to be home, to heal stuff that predates Dave and predates Chris and predates Derek and goes into my childhood. I feel like I need to heal that so I don't keep bleeding all over everybody.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm not in a place to teach, but I'm more than happy to share. And that's something I've said over and over on social recently is like, hey, I don't want to, I can't teach. I choose not to teach, but I'm happy to share. And if my sharing helps, great. And Jack, he actually emailed back and just said, I love you. I hope you know that I love you. And I love you more now. And I would love to have you on because, we have some similarities. So we got on the podcast. And I don't remember if we were recording or not. So I don't know what made the episode. But he had said, hey, I want to let you know you're exactly where you're supposed to be in every way. And he said, and I believe your sharing is going to be the most impactful thing that you do. And he said, I heard a quote once, not long ago, that went something like, I'm not here to teach you. I'm here to love you. And through my love, you will be taught. And that resonates with me. I'm not here to teach you. So to anyone listening, I'm not here to teach you. I am actually here to love you. And I think that anyone who's worked with me in the past knows that that is real and true for every single thing that I've taught, even if you've been a part of my nutrition education courses. I am not here to teach. I'm not on this earth to teach. I believe I'm on this earth to love. And I believe that love transforms and it guides and it does teach. And I mean, that goes for how it was on Extreme. I was not qualified at the time to teach or transform. I wasn't qualified to teach.
Yeah.
I was qualified through my hellish experiences to love unconditionally, and love changes people.
Yeah. And I look at one, you're my weight loss coach. 2.5 years ago, I was 40 pounds heavier.
Oh, that's right. But I mean, listen, it's not about the number on the scale.
No, it's not.
It's about your heart and your soul and your glowing.
I will say that what actually shifted for me in your group was you were like...
Keira was in one of my groups.
I was.
Yeah.
Yeah. That we hadn't talked in years and I signed up for your group. I don't think we talked in like 3 years.
But what was cool was the impact that you had made in that group of women just by being you. That's
Thank
part
you.
of what I love about you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Is you are just you.
I can't be any other way.
And she's free, right? You know what I'm saying, Abby? It's like she's fully expressed and like you're just like a firecracker. And I love it.
Which either activates or just burns the whole damn town. So it's just either you're going to love it or you're going to hate it. And sometimes we just burn down villages. No, because we either create magic.
Yeah, at one point.
Like we're either going to create magic or we're just going to burn the whole damn town. Like it's just going to. But okay, I have to say this though, is that it was your love in that group, which was PS, it was so great when I signed up for your group and then you like texted me like, Keira, I haven't talked to you in years. You just signed up for my weight loss group? Yeah, Heidi. I figured.
Hey, what's up? You just paid me. Why'd you pay me money? Like you're my friend.
Like Heidi, I need help. And you know, what was powerful is you were like, when was the last time you looked in the mirror?
Oh, I remember.
And I was like, I don't have a mirror.
Yeah.
And you're like, when was the last time that you weighed yourself? Like, I haven't weighed myself in years. And you were like, you just actually held this place of love for me. And it was the first time I was like, oh, I'm not willing to see myself. And your love made it safe enough for me to go buy a mirror and buy a scale and be like, it's time for me to see truth. But it was the safety of your love.
Thank you.
And I feel like that's what we're creating here is like safety. Like we live in a world where no one's real and everything looks perfect and we all know it's not.
Yeah.
And there's safety that you bring with your love. And so like, I'm so excited about whatever this is. And like, we don't even know. Maybe I'll be on one episode. Maybe I'll be on 4. Like we just take it in 1 second at a time. But like, whatever this is, people are going to feel so safe to be themselves.
What did I write? When I was writing a goal of this, because you just said something.
Yeah.
It just in brainstorming. No, first, I want to touch on, you said something about truth. You said with the mirror, Heidi, you taught me that at first I need to see the truth.
Yeah.
I think that is key for anytime I see anyone suffering or in like angst, right? I know enough now through my experience of doing it the hard way. I'm not going to say the wrong way, doing it the hard way, that any angst and dis-ease in me is usually the result of an untruth or me not being willing to look at a truth. And sometimes the truth is ugly. Right?
Sucks.
It does. But the only thing that sucks more than an ugly truth is the ugly truth in the dark.
Oh,
right?
Yes.
It's an ugly truth that we don't want to look at. The second we bring truth to light, speaking of looking at, I mean, whether it's your body and you seeing yourself in the mirror, or it's a secret that you're hiding,
or it's a relationship.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Right.
Yeah,
But when you see truth, you can't unsee truth.
Just that acknowledgement right there
Yeah.
is huge, because then when you know it's there, you don't have to do something about it right away. And I think there's this idea, well, if I see it, then I have to do something about it. No, first, all you need to do is see it. Right. And there's been a lot of me finding truths about myself as I'm prepping for this podcast, like all of my old patterns creeping back, and I have to name them. And I named them and I didn't change all of them right away. But now that I know that they're there, I can't not know that they're there. And every single day, it's not about doing it perfectly. And this is what I have taught in my communities. It's not about doing it perfectly. It's about like every single day. Am I 1% better or further along today in at least one area than I was yesterday? This is the human thing. And there are areas I'm going to backslide in. Same with you and me. But it is that truth that guides everything. And I actually think too, this is a great thing to name, because in knowing you and loving you, and every time I'm in your orbit, or you're in my orbit, I will say, there's just like, there's pure love and joy. And there's like it's like a light. Right?
There's a whole lot of laughter because we are wild.
You know
as
why?
hell.
What it is we are just truth tellers. We are actual
I know.
truth tellers in a way that we're like, okay, this truth has to stay right here for now. Like, you know,
we're like, we might record some podcasts that will launch in 2 years
or 20 years or like after we die. But what I was going to say is that light and that thing that is so attractive, it's called truth. And I think anytime you feel the energy of somebody who you're like, oh my gosh, I want to be around that person. Like I can't, it's truth that you are feeling. You are feeling and witnessing authenticity. It's somebody in their raw state. And that's why you can even see someone in their messiness. And the more honest and authentic you are, the more you love them. I mean, that's one of my issues. I have to be careful which men I let in my orbit because if they are truth tellers, no matter how messy they are, I have so much love for truth.
Well, truth is like, it's the stable ground that you can really plant in.
Oof.
That's it. It's like, and that's why,
there's
magic,
safety in it because you know what to expect.
Yeah, it's like, there's truth here. I may hate the truth, but at least it's truth.
Amen. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I like that. So let's find our way. Let's find our way back to what we wanted to talk about today. That's why I'm here.
If you could see the Post-its, hold on. I just have to show. I was told not to grab the Post-its and distract.
I told her not to.
But like, I don't have a name.
Okay,
for my
that
podcast.
Feels good.
Okay, we went through this. Bear with us, guys. These are my. We talked about the resistance.
I feel like what needs to be shared is starting over. Weird.
So
that's what I.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
So really, I mean, I had said I think both of these go hand in hand. I don't have a name for this yet.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a thing where I've been like, hey, God will show me. Listen, I am a hippie child turned Jesus freak.
But I'm such a God girl. So this is the thing I love.
This is new for me.
Yeah, I know. It's like every time you say it, I'm like,
girls,
is this what's actually coming out of her mouth?
I feel like this is a new, another podcast at some point because
all day.
It's been a journey for me. And the journey actually started, I think a lot of people think it started after Dave died or when he died. It didn't. It started, after my depression and anxiety in 2022. Yeah. And it was it was like hey, there's no other way. And we'll go into that another time. Yeah. But having God in my life has shifted me in a major way. Yeah. I know I no longer care what anybody else thinks. Yeah. I just don't. Yeah. I care what he thinks.
God is the stable ground.
Yeah. He is the truth. He is the truth.
Yeah, it's the only ground that actually will never crack.
I love that. Yeah.
I can't wait for that episode. Stay tuned.
Maybe you can do that one with me.
Yeah, we're going to need to do that one. Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't have a name for this yet. Mm-hmm. And there's part of me that's like, I mean, this is a whole different episode too. Maybe it's just welcome to Heidi's Lane because my name is really Heidi Lane, right? Maybe it's Heidi Lane. Maybe. And I had a friend suggest something to me. You'll notice I can't take credit for things I didn't come up with. Yeah. And this friend has always suggested things that have been impactful in how I impact the world, believe it or not. He had said, hey, there's that post that you do, and it really resonates with me in relationship to who you are. And there's this quote that he was referring to that says, don't be afraid to start over. This time you're not starting from scratch. You're starting from experience. Don't be afraid to start over. This time you are not starting from scratch. You are starting from experience.
I like that.
And I don't want to call myself the queen, although I am a queen and you are a queen and Abby, you are a queen and you watching are either a queen or a king. Mm-hmm. But I do feel like I am one of the queens of starting over. The number of times in my life that something that felt stable and long lasting and happily ever after, the number of times that those things have actually either shifted on me or been pulled out from under me, or, whether it's my dad passing away, Dave passing away, 2 marriages ending, businesses failing. I think everybody listening and I think we all can relate to the idea of starting over being really difficult. The idea of starting over being really difficult. And the only way to get good at starting over is to do it often, like with anything.
It's
Practice
like a muscle.
Practice makes progress, right?
Yeah.
And it's an uncomfortable muscle. Starting over, or the idea of starting over, which is why we stay tethered to these things that are toxic in our world, right? These things that we know aren't good for us, whether it be an abusive marriage or relationship or a toxic business or something that is just energetically pulling you. We tether ourselves to these things because we are so fearful of starting over. Yes, there's comfort in the chaos. Like there's comfort in that. But I think more than the comfort, it is the fear of starting over because we think I'm going to have to start from scratch. Right. And we're never, ever, one thing that's guaranteed, we all know we're going to die. And I think the other thing that's guaranteed is every one of us is going to find ourselves in a place between now and the time that we die, where we're starting over again. And I think if we can reframe that, like if this podcast can be a platform where we help reframe starting over as a thing that's not scary anymore, but it's actually beautiful. Right?
You know what's super weird is that the amount of times that we've gone in and out of friendship, it's like we've started over every single time.
Every time.
That's so crazy.
Every time. Yeah.
So crazy. Can I share something that I learned when I was, my marriage was ending and it obviously wasn't in my highest good to go back, but I found myself wanting to go back because it was 20 years. 20 years, like half my life. And I was praying to God and I was shown the story of Moses and the children of Israel.
I don't even know that. Remember, I'm new to God.
Okay.
I'm new to Bible stories.
I'm going to bring it really simple. Okay. So for years and generations upon generations, the Israelites were slaves to the Egyptians. And they just were waiting for the promise that someone was going to save them. And finally, God raises Moses to save them. And he takes them from Egypt, from out of slavery, parts the Red Sea, for crying out loud, right? Yeah. And they get to the other side and then they're walking in the wilderness. And you know what they say? I'd rather go back to being a slave because I knew I would be fed, because I knew what it was like to be a slave.
Wow.
And in that moment, God was like, you only want to go back because it's what you knew.
Yeah.
And so what I was shown was I have to see a new vision ahead of me that makes me not want to go back.
And a vision that you could create.
Yeah.
This is why envisioning and dreaming is actually super important. And I have a really hard time naturally dreaming because I am scared of not living up to my dream. Right. So I love what you just shared.
Yeah.
And I can relate. I had someone not too long ago. This was after anxiety, panic attacks landing me in the hospital. I knew, again, I knew God did not want me in the businesses I was in. They were amazing and it changed the world. It changed the women in the community. But I also knew that I had to come to Jesus with myself and say, am I doing this for them or am I doing this for me? Am I serving? Am I building the kingdom of God or am I building the kingdom of Heidi? It's another thing I had a friend ask me. And if I'm being real with myself, I think it's easy for personal development people to say, oh, it's for the world. Yeah. But if we really, really stop, I was doing it for my families. I needed to provide, right? So I was doing it to provide. And then of course there was like a dopamine hit as their lives would be changed. And so it was like, okay, well, I really doing like, what would building the kingdom of God look like? And if I know what the kingdom of God building looks like for me, and it looks like healing myself and focusing on my 4 kids. And I believe that while I don't know how that's going to impact the world, I feel like any impact to the world will be far greater. God gets to decide that. I don't get to decide that. It's going to be greater because I will show up as me and my kids will show up as me or as them. Love you. I know, Keira. It's hard.
I don't know why that got me so hard, but it is so scary.
I know.
To be a single mom.
I know.
And you just saying those words, it was like, that's the trust. Like, hey, God, I'm going to show up for my 5 kids, and you better show up on the other side. Because that is our most important role, is being a mom.
And he will. He will.
I wasn't supposed to cry in this.
No, I
This wasn't the deal.
No, it was. Remember, we're doing this my way. And my way has you crying right now. But yeah, it is but I will say I knew that since June of 2022, and I didn't listen to God. I didn't listen to my intuition. I didn't listen to my inner knowing out of fear, because I was like those people that left.
Yeah.
And every time I'd leave a little bit, I would start to be like, where's my food? And so I'd go back, and I can't tell you how many times I said, I'm not doing another challenge, or I'm not doing another nutrition education course, or I'm not, because the energy that it took from me and my kids, the energy it took was real, and it gave to the world. And I built, I don't regret any of it. I love it. It was true. Like, it fed my soul.
Yeah.
And I hate to even say it fed parts of my ego, because I knew, like, I had quantitative proof and evidence that I was making a difference and I was enough. Right. And what am I enough if no one can see the benefit that I'm making in me and my kids? And then that's when I had to turn to God, right? And say, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. I need to let go if people are going to think I'm crazy because I'm not going to work as much. And that's okay. It's okay if someone looks at me, a man looks at me and says, you're wasting your talents and your gifts by not showing up in the world. It's okay. And it's okay if someone says, how are you going to feed your family? I'm going to figure it out, because I figure everything out. Right. But it was that fear. And the same went for my relationship. It was like every time I left, I was like, hold on. But I was fed over there, and I was fed love. And wait, hold on. I didn't have enough self-love to not need it from an external source. And Dave was the greatest at loving me. I've actually never, and I mean, I don't want to say I will never, because we have to be careful what we manifest. Up till that point in my life, up till now, I've never experienced somebody loving me as deeply and as well.
He created the pattern.
He did.
So now that anything after can't be less than.
And I definitely, I'm aware of that now, you know? But yeah, anytime I was leaving or it was like I would tell my life coach, I said, there's so much fear. I am fearful. And she said something beautiful to me one day after she heard me over and over. She said, anytime you say I'm fearful or I'm scared, I want you to replace it with I'm lacking trust. And think of this in any area of your life. Like, whether you've left and you're not being fed, you were a prisoner. But you were being fed as a prisoner.
You knew, you knew it was crap, but you knew it was coming.
Yes. Yeah. But like, think about it. When we take that leap, and I mean, Dave's whole premise of his book was leaving the safe harbor, right? When we leave the safe harbor into those choppy waters, it's scary. There's so much fear, right? But that word fear stops us. But when we can identify that fear is a lack of trust, it's like, oh, holy crap. Hold on. I trust God. Not only do I, like, even if you're someone who's like, I don't know what I believe, if it's God, the universe, Mother Nature, higher source, it doesn't matter. Trust yourself.
This is the final piece of that story, is that God poured down manna every day for the children of Israel. But if they stuffed their pockets with the manna in fear that it wouldn't come the next day, it would spoil. And so God told me, stop stuffing your pockets. Stop stuffing your pockets with manna, Keira. I will always deliver. And that's it.
I love that.
It's just the trust.
It is.
It's the trust.
And I think it's super important to say
Yeah.
Trusting God doesn't mean not putting in the effort.
Yes. Yes. This is
You
so big.
still got to work.
You still got to show up and do
Right?
You have to take actions.
You have to take
You
actions.
can have a car that's filled with gas, but if you never actually pushed on the gas and drove it, God could fill your truck. It could fill it up with gas all day long. If you do not take action,
yes.
the car is not moving.
Yeah. And I want to be clear, even in me in this space where I'm saying I'm not working as much, what that means is instead of 10 businesses I'm running, I'm only running 5.
Right. I was like, can we clarify that you did not retire?
But what I did,
that's not what happened.
But what I did do is I did what's the word?
A clean out.
Yeah. And I said, which things are energetically are requiring most of my energy, and what is the financial return? Because this is where I needed to start. I had to start understanding my books and what I was making. Okay. So what things are requiring less with a big financial return, those are the only things, because my energy must go to me and my children. Yeah. So even if it means the big energy output that gave me the ego input, and I don't want to say ego, but like the Heidi, you're enough. Yeah. Right? I'm going to have to make peace with that and wipe my hands of it and let it go away and get my enoughness from God, from myself, and from my kids. Yeah. Right? So that I can provide. So I still provide for my kids. Yeah. Right? And so I think that's really important.
So what's the gift?
Okay.
I'm like dying.
It's for you.
Oh, it's for me. What? Oh my God.
I've had it for like 3 weeks.
Did you know that gifts are my love language? Yeah.
I didn't know that.
This is it. I'm yours forever, Heidi. I don't know. Okay, hold on.
I didn't
This is going to make too much noise.
Here, I'll hold it. I'll hold your. There we go. Check.
Wow, look at you.
Check. I didn't wrap it. That was before my. That was when I had more helpers.
That's so great.
I'm scaling down.
I love it. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited right now. I love that we're doing it on the podcast.
I know. This was not planned. This was not planned at all.
This is the best.
I'm really excited about it.
Oh my gosh. I'm so excited.
Do you know what this is? Did I tell you? Okay. I mean, it's wrapped 1,000 times.
Hello, goddess.
Okay.
What does it say?
I have it on right now. It says, hold on, where is it? It says, everything I need is within me. And Keira, every single thing you need to create success, not find it. You've already created success, but everything you need to walk your path is within you.
Oh, goodness.
This was actually the last gift Dave ever gave me. These 2 things. Wow. So it's Athena, the warrior goddess who fought next to Hercules. Not just next to him, but she fought. And then everything I need is within me. Yeah. I mean, literally the week before he died.
Oh my gosh, Heidi, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Heidi.
And I hope everybody listening knows the truth in that. It doesn't just go for me and Keira. It goes for you.
Yeah.
And I think the only way that we can really feel the power and the truth of that is through repetitions, right? Like a muscle. And it's through courageously starting over every time we're called to it. Like instead of looking at starting over or something ending as a death sentence, right? Like a sentence. Like, oh, this ended, that's a sentence that I have to serve again. No, you are being provided the most beautiful opportunity to start over from so much experience, more wisdom and love. At the ending of one thing is also, it's the beginning with compassion and empathy of another. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Heidi.
You're welcome.
You know, I bought this book for you.
You did.
I never gave to you.
But you gave me crystals and cards.
I did.
And
I did give you
love
lots of
them.
things.
My kids love them too.
I bought this book for you. Then I kept it. It's fine. I'll give you another one. But it's the story of a tree. It's a children's book. And it's a story of this tree. And there was 5 trees that were all together in a grove. And they all lost their leaves the first winter.
Okay.
Except for one. He held to his brown leaves so tight. He held them and he held them and he held them. And then the spring came and they all got new leaves and they all grew like 6 feet. And he stayed the same size. And he just held and he held and he held. And then it went another season and they all lost. And nope, I'm not letting go of my leaves, until one day they were towering above him and all the birds were landing on them. And he was down below and he's like, what happened? And this one little bird came and said, if you drop your leaves, you will grow. And so he decided to finally drop his leaves. And when he was bare is when he grew the most. And I read that book and I was like, this is me and Heidi's life. Your paths and my paths. It's been, how many times do I have to drop my leaves again? But every time we do, it's that start over. It's the growth.
Oh, Keira. It's how many times do we get to drop our leaves?
Oh,
you know? And it is interesting because the times in my life where I've experienced the most growth and joy, I think that like two growth, joy, and peace, I'm going to throw in a third word, were the times that I was bare. And I think bare for everybody looks different.
Yeah.
For me, you'll notice a theme. Bare for me is without a man, because that has been part of my pattern. Right. And which is a sign. Like I need to be more bare. And bare without business, because those are the things that have defined me, my relationships, my businesses. And I think for everyone, it's going to be slightly different. Like, what are the things? What are your leaves? This is a really great thing to kind of leave people with, is just an invitation to pinpoint what some of your leaves are. Like, what are the things that you are holding on to? And those things, their identities and roles, and it's like security blankies
and beliefs,
yes, that you don't want, like, because those limiting beliefs, they're going to hold you down. And then like it's again, awareness is seeing this truth and being aware of it is totally different than doing something about it. So don't feel like once you see them, it means you have to right away shed all of the leaves at once. It's a process. Be patient. And no matter what your process looks like, know that it is exactly what it's meant to be. And if you just focus on being 1% better or moving 1% toward the right direction, dropping a little bit of that leaf every single day.
And I mean,
you're going to experience growth.
That necklace, right? Like this of like, oh, I have everything I need within me.
Yeah.
So I can leave. I can let these leaves drop.
Yes.
Because I know that I have everything I need.
Yeah.
Wow. That's powerful.
Okay. So I think this feels like the end of the first podcast.
So I want to do this.
Okay.
I'm going to hold this space for you to drop into your heart.
Okay.
And I want you to listen to what is the message you want to leave with them, that when they leave this episode with us, it's like it wraps them in the blanket and brings them joy, peace, safety.
You know, and I'm thinking now, and also anytime you guys are watching or listening to this, I would want to leave every podcast the way that I leave any conversation, right? Yeah. I mean, I want this podcast, I want you being here to feel the same way I hope people feel when they're with me. I want and I mean, if anyone's ever been in my groups or been my friend, I hope this is the truth. I want everyone in my orbit to feel loved for exactly who they are, even the parts that they might be scared to show. Seen, because I do see you. Heard, because I hear you, and what you have to say matters and is so important. Even though this is a podcast, there's a part of me that wants this to transcend physics, right?
Yeah.
And I want you to feel seen and heard here. And I want you to know that you're enough.
Yeah.
I want you to know that exactly who you are and how you are in your evolution, whether you're just beginning or you're highly evolved, or whether you're starting over, or whether you're at the peak of something that you started a long time ago. I want you to feel and to know that you are enough. And I know my mom always said to me, she always said, you better leave everything you touch better than when you found it. And I think one of my greatest hopes for this is, in addition to my own healing, but I hope that everybody leaves here feeling better than when I met you.
There you go.
So I see you. I love you. I hear you. And you're enough. Thanks for hanging out on my couch with me.